Okay, welcome, gentlemen. We ready?
Yep.
All right.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. The time is 11:05 a.m. This is a special meeting agenda with Kootenai Electric Cooperative and KRE, and it's to discuss the gas to energy contract for potential renegotiation or assignment. Attending for the Board of County Commissioners are Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. So I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves. Doug, why don't you take it away, sir?
My name is Doug Elliott. I'm the General Manager and CEO of Kootenai Electric Cooperative.
I'm Scott Davis, Vice President of Engineering and Technical Services at Kootenai Electric Cooperative.
Go ahead, Peter.
I'm Peter Rickson, outside counsel for Kootenai Electric Cooperative.
Whatever. Art, go right ahead, sir.
Hi, I am Art Hayes. I am outside counsel for KRE.
Go ahead, Benny.
I'm Benny Benson, manager KRE and president ESI.
Okay, then. And so on this side, Jamila, go ahead, please.
Jamil Holmes, Civil Deputy Prosecuting Attorney.
Okay.
John Phillips, Director, Kootenai County Solid Waste.
Angela Bergeson, Business and Finance Manager for Kootenai County Solid Waste.
Okay. And Tina is our clerk here. Nancy Pluff is actually our senior market analyst, and she's also filling in for Nancy Jones, who left. And taking up for Nancy Jones is Jonathan Gilham, who is our new communications coordinator, and that includes public information requests, media type public broadcasts, and things of that nature. So, Doug, sir, without any further delay, go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. Jamila, first of all, you missed IT professional in your introduction. You fixed the IT problem. So thank you for your time today. What we wanted to speak with you about is the potential assignment and release of liability for our landfill gas purchase agreement. Earlier today, I had sent out a draft of an agreement that we can talk through. It's just that, it's a draft. Just a little bit of background for the plan. I recognize that all three of the commissioners weren't on the commission at the time that the plant got created. In 2009, when I assumed my role, we became aware of it as a consequence of a couple of our directors who were working with Engineering at the time, and they and the solid waste facility were exploring the possibility of developing a landfill gas to energy plant. And after we became involved in it, we felt like that was a viable opportunity for us as well. We assumed the lead role in developing it. And over the course of the next several months, we negotiated a clean renewable energy bond that helped finance the facility through CoBank. We entered into a point-to-point transmission agreement with Avista that all the power that's produced from the plant is wheeled over our distribution system, delivered to Avista, and then Avista wheels that power across their transmission system to a point of delivery in Oregon that Idaho Power receives. And then we negotiated a PURPA agreement with Idaho Power within Oregon under Oregon statute to take that power and purchase it as a clean energy product. So to effect that latter transaction, we ended up needing to take Idaho Power before FERC to assert our right to be able to do that. And the plant has been operating under those core agreements ever since. And there's, I guess, two other ones that I would mention. One is our operations agreement with Engineering. This is the only plant that Kootenai Electric operates. We purchase all of our power from Bonneville Power and through market purchases. And this plant, while it produces power, we don't bring the power to load. We wheel the power to Oregon. And this ends up being a very complex financial transaction for us. And to the extent that the revenues exceed our expenses, we use that to help lower our overall power supply costs. Turns out that that has become a really cumbersome process for us. It's very operationally intensive, and there's just frankly not enough margin for us to feel like this is a good investment for our resources for our members, which is kind of predicating our interest in divesting the plant. The other agreement that I'd mention is the renewable energy credit. Because it's a renewable resource, we're able to produce renewable energy credits. With our agreement with the county, we share those 50-50. We remarket them, and then we share the benefit. So KRE operates several of these facilities. They approached us a few months ago with an interest to purchase the plant. And through a course of negotiations, we came to an agreement where we felt like our members could get the value that we needed out of the plant to divest it. We're certainly not making any money on this. In fact, we're taking a little bit of a financial loss, but we feel like it's more of a loss for us to continue operating the plant because of the complexities. They, on the other hand, operate several of these, and they're able to bring their resources to bear and make it a more profitable endeavor for them. So our request is, with all of these underlying agreements, we need to assign them to KRE to effect the sale. So we're in the process of negotiating that with Idaho Power, with Avista, with 3 Degrees, and subsequently, we've got the landfill gas to purchase agreement with the county that we would also like to have assigned. One of the other provisions in that agreement pertains to the liability. And there's really 2 separate asks of the county. One is to assign the agreement, and the second is to consider a release of liability, because in our view, there's really not a lot to be gained from our continuing liability, since KRE has a balance sheet that literally is 5 times the size of KEC's. And by maintaining that liability for KEC, what it really does for us is frustrate the sale and really makes it more uncertain for our directors. So what we want to do is make this request to the commission, give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have, and recognizing that there's a lot of legal details in here, really have an opportunity for Art, and Peter, and Jamila to be able to discuss these matters too. So with that, I'm going to shut up and turn the floor over to Benny and Scott to share any information that they might.
Okay, and I might go first a little bit. You know, the engineering staff at KEC has had responsibility for overseeing the design and operation of the landfill facility since inception. You know, first energy date commercial operation was achieved with Idaho Power back in 2014. And since then, the engineering staff has been engaged to continue to maintain the agreements that Doug spoke of, handle all of the compliance and reporting requirements, and provide the technical support, on-site assistance for the continued operation of the facility. Landfill gas is collected from the wellfield collection system and powers 2 Cat 3520 reciprocating engines. We're roughly producing 14,000 megawatt hours of energy on an annual basis, and through the contractual arrangements have a market for that energy. We are not experts at operating a plant at Kootenai. You know, the engineering staff has primary emphasis through educational background and our own experiences in power delivery to our membership, and not so much with power generation and instrumentation and control. So that has really, I think, been the precipitous of the agreement that we have had since inception with Engineering, who brings that value to both KEC and the county, that added expertise in operating the facility, because that's their portfolio. And I think have a mutual benefit, or would like to highlight the mutual benefit that we have with KRE and Engineering. So I think with that, maybe that's a good segue. Benny, I'll let you take it over from there.
I'm glad to jump in, although I might take a quick break if there's any questions just on what Doug and Scott have presented, and then if not, I'm glad to. Okay.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go right ahead.
Okay, so my name's Benny Benson. I'm going to represent a couple entities, and I see Art in the video here. So Art, you can either shake your head like don't say that, or do say that, or you're correct or wrong, because that'll be my legal counsel. And just for what it's worth, Art Hayes, our legal counsel, we've worked together on probably over 200 megawatts worth of landfill gas energy projects. So just for some familiarity. Let me know if that static is a problem. I hear it on my side, but
No, we're
as long
good
as
here.
I'll keep going. Okay. Just for reference, KRE is an acronym for Kootenai Renewable Energy. KRE would be set up as a special purpose entity made up of two owners. The majority owner, actually, I'll say the minority owner is Outlaw Energy, which is an affiliate of ESI. Or Engineering Solutions, thus the contracted operations of the facility. Outlaw Energy as a whole is approximately a balance sheet of close to $60 million of operating and under construction projects. ESI has in its own asset value close to 50 million. We've designed, installed, and operate close to 200 megawatts worth of landfill gas energy projects, primarily using the equipment that you have at this facility, the Caterpillar 3520, as Scott mentioned. We currently manage about 20 of those engines, between 5 and 10 facilities, including managing the gas systems, the flares, the compliance. So I think there's a lot of benefits there. The other partner is a group that we've worked with for a number of years and have a strong relation with. I'll wait for the Benny, keep going. Are you good?
Yeah, go right ahead, Benny.
Okay, good. All right, I just real quick wanted to give you the partners here for the backing. So Packlet Milliken, we can send or put some of this together, but their balance sheet right now is about 1.3 billion, and it's a blend between, it's about half and half between energy, which is a mix of solar and landfill gas energy to projects, and then real estate. So that's kind of the blend of the KRE, just so you have a understanding of who's, or maybe the strength of who's coming in to support the business. With that, we're excited about this. There's a variety of these type projects that we're involved in that we think it's our core business. It's biogas energy. There's areas we can continue with the kind of the existing relation with the county. JP and I have known each other for a number of years. There's areas we might be able to work together. There's a variety of things where I think there's a synergy that pulls our companies together, knowing on kind of how both sides can interact together. So with that, I'll just leave it for questions.
Any questions for Benny? Benny, how long have you been operating our local plant here?
We've actually operated your plant since its inception.
Okay.
So we were part of the original group, and I forget their names when they were looking to do the development, and then from startup. So we have experience from ground zero with your facility.
Okay. No questions for Benny? Anyone else care to speak? JP, do you have any
I might add that question,
Yeah,
wherever that came from, is relevant. Where these type of transactions tend to be more disruptive is when there's a complete new group which brings in a brand new operator, which has there isn't an existing relationship with the landfill, the gas system, understanding their compliance needs. So one of the reasons we think this works well is that all remains consistent and to some extent probably even gets a little bit closer between the county and the operator interface. So that is a fair question.
Okay. JP, anything?
The only thing I would add is Benny's correct. It's been a good partnership so far. We've been ultimately partners with KEC, and then KEC subbing the work out with Benny. So with all three entities working together, it's worked out well that way so far.
Go ahead, Doug.
I'd also add that KEC is not leaving the equation here. We still have our infrastructure that KRE
Right.
needs to rely on to wheel the power to Avista. We're still here, but what this is allowing us to do is kind of step out of being the intermediary and really leaving it to the brain trust of KRE to work more closely in operating and managing the plant. We're at this point feeling like we're not adding any value to the plant operations. In fact, it's kind of frustrating our efforts. And we feel that this is a great opportunity to improve efficiencies and allow the county and KRE to work more directly with one another.
Well, let me ask you this. How does this relationship, okay, how would the assignment, which basically takes KEC out of the picture?
That would be the release.
That would be the release, thank you. How does that benefit, for example, how does that benefit the taxpayers of Kootenai County versus the relationship that we have today?
So this would be my view of it, and this is why I think the attorneys need to weigh in whether or not this view is a correct one. But in my opinion, you've got KRE who is willing to assume full liability and responsibility for the landfill gas agreement. They're willing to step in and assume the liability that KEC currently holds. So what we would be doing is we're asking for the agreement to be assigned and for us to be released from liability, and that same liability be instead assigned to KRE. If we do that, the constituency of Kootenai County is not harmed because they still have an entity that liability is appropriately assigned to. And KEC is not harmed because we're able to have a transaction that is not encumbered by that unknown liability.
Okay. Jamila, did you have any questions?
I would let the board digest what's just been said, but I don't think we got a definitive answer as to how this is possibly in the best interests of the population of Kootenai County, not just your clients.
So let me ask the question differently. How would you be concerned that this would harm the county, the constituency of Kootenai County?
Mr. Phillips just indicated that the working relationship has worked well in that triumvirate form with all three parties involved. I need for you to help me understand how taking an entity out benefits Kootenai County when logically having additional entities that face liability should something go sideways is necessarily going to protect Kootenai County more.
So at this point, I don't feel that Kootenai Electric is adding any or much value to the equation. When something goes wrong, our staff has to drop what it's doing to respond to an issue. And those same things can be done by KRE staff as they could be from KEC. So from the county standpoint, there's no incremental risk or harm in having another entity perform the work that we're doing. It's just that it's less disruptive to them than it is for us. If we have a transmission outage and we have to reschedule power, Scott and his team is having to drop everything that they're doing and respond to that transmission rescheduling. Well, KRE manages several of these plants and they have staff that can similarly do that. It's just that it's in our responsibility to do that because we're in the middle. So we're trying to remove ourselves from being in the middle and transfer that responsibility, and in doing so, also transfer that liability to KRE, who should rightly have it.
I do think that there is a difference between liability on the one hand and your operational procedures on the other. you can change your operational procedures in working with KRE or whatever successor entity there is without necessarily removing yourself from facing any liability should things go sideways. I don't understand.
So what,
I feel like you're conflating the two.
okay, what liability are you concerned with KEC retaining? What are the things that could go wrong that you would be worried about in protecting the county constituents?
I don't necessarily want to speculate about what could go wrong, but any breach of the agreement that has 12 years remaining,
Little over 11.
yeah,
2032.
would be handled the way that we have been handling processes throughout. And so the status quo is, the county is operating under the status quo, and
Well, the status quo is unsustainable for KEC. That's just a given. That was partly evidenced when we did the last amendment. We were facing some financial strain, and we renegotiated that agreement. And that's where the $375,000 of landfill gas purchase avoidance came from. We have consumed that, and we're now operating under a continued strain that we have faced with a escalation factor that's been based into that agreement from day one. And what's happened over time is that the cost of natural gas has decreased, but the price inflation that we pay for landfill gas increases, and it makes the cost of market power much more competitive than the output of this plant. All the while, this is our only facility. We only have this one to operate. We're not even bringing it to load. So it becomes an operational challenge for us. We're also facing some very unfortunate transmission outages. That path that I talked about from Avista to Idaho Power is a very long and rural transmission line, and it is going through a maintenance reconductoring. So Avista is taking their portion of that line, which is actually jointly owned between Avista and Idaho Power, out of service for 6-month windows of time for 5 to 6 years. And what that does for us is it cuts off our path to market. So we either have to find another viable path to market, which is negotiating another PERPA agreement and having an entirely different price recovery in those intervals. So with the economics of the plant, we are right at the threshold of finding ourselves needing to mothball the plant in those 6-month curtailment intervals. KRE has a different price consideration because our costs don't need to be recovered. It's just their costs, and they can operate the plant more efficiently. So they're able to bring the plant back into performance better than we can. That's the purpose of the reassignment. Now, the release of liability is, in our mind, really helps us with the certainty that we have going forward. We understand that having another entity to hold liable is preferential for the county. What I would ask is, how much better off is the county with another entity as being liable, whereas right now, it's only KEC that you would hold liable. We're asking the county to instead assign that liability to KRE. In our view, the county is no worse off, and this transaction is less risky and uncertain for KEC.
for you.
Yeah. So the county is not worse off in our view. You may have a different opinion, and that's the reason for this meeting, is to give you an opportunity to, our attorneys to have an opportunity to discuss that, because it's above my pay grade.
Sure. So I'm not really concerned about the assignment or reassignment, but as far as the release goes, I mean, if we sign a new agreement with KRE, and so now they are in that liability, like first chair. So you guys maybe become like the second on that, instead of just getting out of that last 11 years, but having, so it's like first mortgage and second mortgage, right? So I guess that's kind of how I was thinking that this would go forward. So it kind of protects us, but you should feel comfortable because they, you know, like you've explained that how their operation is going to be different. And so you won't, even though the assignment exists, or I'm sorry, the liability exists, it won't necessarily be realized on your end. So what about that?
I think that is a potential path forward. We've talked about that, and if that is the approach that needs to occur to make this transaction happen, we have some additional work that needs to be done within our purchase and sales agreement, and all of that is feasible. But we were hopeful that we could at least explore the release liability, and in the event that that's not possible, then is there a way that we can further sidewall what that liability looks like? Is the real liability that we're talking about end of plant site restoration? Is it their failure to purchase gas and pay for an invoice? What is the bounds of that liability so that
All the
we
above.
understand it?
I mean, anytime I have a contract and I can have two people who have liability, I don't release either one of them until the contract's complete. And others have said, well, you can release us. Well, if the contract goes as stated, the liability is transparent. But if you start saying, well, what if, there's a lot of what ifs that could happen that could get real messy in terms of liability. So I'm okay if we want to assign operational, you know, if you guys want to change your operational work and with KRE, I think that's fine if it helps you. But as far as liability, no, I'm not prepared to release that.
And I think, Doug, what Leslie mentioned is what you and I had discussed briefly on the phone last week, which is, I think what we're saying is, for us to refuse to assign liability, to approve the assignment, would potentially, I mean, we obviously have to avoid a situation where we're being unreasonable, but I think to have you sharing in the liability, whereas you're already basically operating the way it would continue to operate in the future, is probably the best approach if we're going to perform the assignment. Does it keep you on the hook? Yes, it does. But then again, if we held to the letter of the contract, you're on the hook anyway through 2032. So if you're willing to negotiate with KRE, where you have, if you will, shared liability, that may be something under which we could consider the assignment. Am I saying that correctly?
I think it makes sense.
So
Can-
I would say
Benny,
that,
do you mind if I?
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I think you look to the left. That means maybe that's the screen. So I'm just checking. I just, and maybe this is confirmation in asking because there's a lot of discussion about liability. So with respect to liability, I believe the constituency of the county and the constituency of KEC are probably the same. The discussion about releasing of liability still remains amongst your constituency. The thought process being KRE comes in with an entity that's got a balance sheet 5 times KEC's and the strength, and you remove that liability from your local constituency. That'd be the only thing. If you're looking for where there's a county benefit, it would be pull it away from your parties. I might have that wrong, but that's an observation that I think you bring in a stronger party with a balance that has a spread that's further than your local support. And then the other thing I was going to answer to maybe a little bit on Doug's side of it, the overall basis behind the transaction is really an alignment of core business strengths or core businesses, in that KEC as a utility focuses in on the transmission and supply of power, KRE as a landfill gas generation O&M facility or group focused in on their core business, and that's the difference between. So overall, I think there's a beneficial efficiency for both parties and an ability to remove a big chunk of this liability off of anybody within the local constituency. So just as a thought process.
Questions, Bill? Nothing?
No.
Leslie? JP?
The only thing I would refer to is Article 9 of the original agreement that talks about the assignment of the agreement and successors and assigns, and I would recommend that we follow the contract.
Okay.
My recommendation.
Peter and Art, anything to add?
I heard part of that, but I think it was follow the existing contract. Is that?
That's correct.
Yeah. The intent behind this was to do that, and was simply the assignment of this. I will add that, you know, if the county is open, there's a lot of areas we can work together. There's, you know, ability to negotiate in both parties' benefits, but that wasn't the intent as an opener.
Any other questions?
So
Go
I
ahead,
just
Doug.
ask a question of Peter and
Yeah,
Art.
go right ahead.
So obviously, what this means, if the assignment, if the release of liability isn't granted, then KEC is going to want to be assured that our liability is adequately addressed within the purchase and sales agreement. And you're going to need to find ways to guarantee that to our board. And I'm going to need to know from you that you feel that is plausible. Because that does increase the uncertainty that our board is going to have with the transaction. And if the sale falls apart because of that, then we will end up in a position where the plant continues to be under financial duress. We're going to be increasingly in a situation where the plant is going to have longer operational outages. And I think it's in everybody's interest to help avoid that. So can we build into the agreement the appropriate safeguards that I'm going to need to go back to our board to make sure that they feel confident that our membership has the safeguards that they need in this divestiture?
Isn't that more of an agreement that you would have with the entity coming in?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, this is.
And that's
Yeah,
what
this
Doug's
doesn't,
asking.
Yeah, well, but not
we don't need to
asking
talk
the
about it
county.
now.
That's not the county's business.
Correct.
Right.
No, it's not the county's business.
No.
It could become the county's.
No, I don't want it to be the county's, but I really would like to facilitate as much as we could, you guys being to operationally shift some of the burden of operation, whether it's in whole or in part. But as far as liability, I like it the way it is.
We have to shift ownership. That's what's
Okay.
at stake here. And if we do that, then the county benefits by getting a reimbursement of that fuel credit that was given. That's one of the primary benefits to the county. The other benefit is that the ongoing operations of the plant through some of these curtailment periods is much more assured, and we're able, KRE and solid waste facility are able to benefit from that ongoing revenue stream. I'm just concerned from our involvement that what's going to happen is if this sale doesn't transact, we're going to be finding ourselves needing to mothball the facility during those operational outages. That's going to then impact the revenues from fuel sales. So if there's a way that we can limit liability or define it within the scope of our agreement, then we'll do that. So the first place to start was, is the county willing to release liability? In the absence of that, then is there a way to put fences around it?
Right.
And if the message is, no, we have an agreement, this is what it is, like it or leave it, then I'm gonna have to work with KRE and see if we can find a way to make the transaction work that way. So we were asking for some middle ground, if you'd be open to that.
Okay, which is back to your question of Benny, which clearly is not our problem, but in a sense it is, so go right ahead. I'd like to hear Benny's response.
I apologize, Chris, but the response from, and I think maybe that was a request between the lawyers.
Yeah.
Can we work out something between KRE and KEC? And sure, lawyers can write books. I mean, Art's far enough from writing, I can make comments about that. I would just ask the group you open up the dictionary of liability and everybody goes ballistic. But the reality is, step back and ask, is this really an issue at all? And we're not taking over the landfill. It's a piece of leased land that's utilizing KEC's infrastructure to push power and fueled from the landfill. So that concern, I guess, probably might help if you box it in a little bit and say, and define if that's really a bigger concern. So.
Yeah, Benny, I think your point, underlying landfill gas problems or landfill problems would not be a liability of KEC, and quite honestly, operational problems if there were a disaster caused by the O&M operator, that being ESI, that's not KEC's problem either.
Mm-hmm.
Going forward, so it is a finite or maybe a smaller box of potential liabilities than at first glance. But getting back to the commissioner's original question,
Yes.
As to what can be done, in our contract, as you can imagine, it's a relatively straightforward purchase agreement that we're contemplating. I don't want to give away state secrets; it's still being negotiated, but you can imagine that that liabilities are allocated in typical ways, subject to exceptions and all. Benny's group is not going to be terribly interested in taking on responsibilities for something that happened 5 years ago that pops up tomorrow, any more than the reverse would be true. So, though it is still a moving target, it's not the most complicated contract in the world, or won't be.
Peter?
One thing I would point out to the county is that although there are 10 years left on the agreement, it would certainly be in the county's taxpayers' fit to have an entity running this facility that has a long-term view. Quite honestly, they would like out of the agreement. That's not what they do.
Sir,
They're remove.
going to the point where we can't understand you.
Yeah, is your cell phone nearby? You might want to.
Is this better?
Yes.
Oh, good. Let me do it like this then. I'll start over. I think the point is that there's only about 10 years left on this agreement, and I would anticipate that Kootenai is not interested in an evergreen agreement, whereas the potential purchaser is. That's what they do for a living. So there's a lot of life left in that landfill and a lot of potential value to the county taxpayers that you may not be able to capture if this agreement doesn't go through. The other point I'd like to make is that eliminating the middleman, Kootenai, makes the operator much more efficient and much more willing to perhaps take risks with the county hand in hand to come up with creative solutions for using more gas. Whereas Kootenai is just going to be a caretaker. So I think making this deal happen is in fact beneficial to the county taxpayers because Kootenai is, as I say, they're the middleman and they don't have a vested interest in landfill gas to energy projects. Whereas the potential buyer, that's what they do for a living. So that would be my sort of superficial observation here.
So let me just pose a follow-on question to you, Peter. One of the things that our board is going to want to hear is that our members are adequately insulated from unnecessary risk through the divestment of the plant. And I'm going to need to demonstrate that in the terms of the purchase and sales agreement. So all of that is cleared up from our standpoint if we have a release of liability, because then it's a clean transaction for our membership. Liability is assigned from KEC to KRE, and in our mind, right or wrong, the county constituency is no better off or worse off. But if I can't demonstrate that to our board, then we're going to have a challenge, or they're going to have a challenge accepting the terms of the agreement. So can you create the appropriate protection within the terms of the purchase and sales agreement to demonstrate that to our board? And is the way that it's currently worded sufficient, or does additional provisions need to be incorporated?
So I guess, I mean, that's kind of between you guys. We don't need to be involved in that part of it. But I guess I would ask if KRE has seen what your liability is, what that contract is that has 11 years left on it, and they're comfortable with it, then this shouldn't be an issue. So you're asking the citizens of Kootenai County to have faith that KRE is going to provide for this, but yet your board doesn't have faith that KRE is going to provide for it? I guess that's kind of where I'm getting a little confused as we keep going back and forth. So, yeah, I mean, if you guys want to get together and let us know what you come up with, because we're for the assignment. I mean, that's it sounds reasonable, it sounds good, and so I don't see a problem with that. But I want assurance, like your board wants assurance,
Certainly,
that this is going to go well for us. And so, I mean, you know, it's an 11-year period, and if you're comfortable with KRE's providing this as coverage for you for 11 years, then it sounds like it's going to be a win-win for everybody. So
I would just say that our board will view this as Kootenai Electric being able to benefit from divesting the plant, but the county is even more so benefiting because now not only are you inheriting a company that is sharing responsibility for the plant, the liabilities, that's 5 times the balance sheet of ours, but our membership is also being a secondary mitigator to any future risk. And we feel that we have carried a tremendous burden with this plant since day one, and we're attempting to remove that operational distraction from us, and would greatly appreciate the reassignment of that liability.
sure.
That is within your power to vote, and we just appreciate the consideration of that reassignment.
I don't know
Don't
why,
have the liability, you don't have the responsibility or obligation to do that.
I don't know why in the agreement between you and the company,
KRE.
KRE, you can't be put in second position in terms of liability. And that should lessen any heartburn that KEC has, if this
Sure.
company is that big.
I think that what the commissioner is contemplating is the parties other than Kootenai County mutually indemnifying, releasing and holding harmless, and those types of agreements happen all the time, but that's probably not an appropriate discussion for you to have with that other third party right now.
With them, not us.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason for including the commission in that discussion is because there are 3 parties at the table here. And if this agreement falls apart because of these issues, then there can be some impact to the county. And I think we can find a way to ameliorate that between the 2 of us, but did want you to be cognizant of the challenge and make the formal request.
Right, which in my mind makes me even more concerned then if your entity is that concerned about them fulfilling that contract, if that makes sense.
Well, if I will be blunt, there has been nothing but uncertainty with the plant operations here. We see gremlins
Sure.
frequently, and it is in our desire
Sure.
to ameliorate that. And I can understand the county's concern, but in our mind, you would be inheriting somebody, an entity who can be equally responsible for the plant as KEC can be. So
Right, which should make you very comfortable going forward. So that's my hope, is we can.
I think what Leslie's saying is that if we can be comfortable, so can you. And, or your board, for that matter.
appreciate your perspective.
Anyone else?
I'm good.
Doug?
Team?
Benny, anything? Gentlemen?
Nope, I'm good.
I have nothing to add at this point.
Okay.
Okay, then.
So,
Go right ahead, Doug.
Chris, what in your mind is the next step in your county actions? One of the things that we need to do is we're seeking the reassignment of all of our core agreements, and we need to get that formally accepted. And so the agreement that we had sent over earlier today obviously needs some amending.
That's correct.
I'm not sure if you would like our legal team to do that, or Jamila, if you want to take a stab
I can do that this
at it.
afternoon. It's simply going to be an assignment on the
reassignment.
same terms as exists presently, and so that's a one-pager.
And then when would the commission take that action up?
The 23rd of November.
That's perfect.
It's next week.
Perfect.
Yep.
Good.
Okay?
All right.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Public comment.
Glad everybody's power is
Kind of a
on.
tough subject for the public, I think.
Not everybody's. This is why, yeah, anyway. Not yet, but that's okay. I love you guys anyway, so.
Where are you at?
Off of Ohio and Horsepower. So Kloss Lane has a broken pole.
Oh,
Yep, and
One of
there's
nine.
only 3 of us, one of 9, but there's only 3 of us on that pole.
the good news is that this event had every indication of being another January feast.
Right.
We're bringing in contractors and preparing for the worst, and we ended up having 9 broken poles. We'll probably have power on by the end of the day. Fingers crossed. So no FEMA storm.
Yes.
Cool.
I was waiting for that call too. Oh, we need another emergency. Let's get that going, but
Hopefully
so,
no.
Well,
yeah. So thank you.
That'll be
you serviced
necessary.
us as well, Doug, and we had no power interruption down in Cougar Gulch with some very, very big trees, but it held up.
It was an impressive storm.
Yes, it was. Okay, then, so there's no public comment. My time is 11:54, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you,
All
everyone.
right, thank you.